Okay, so once again, I do a lot of breathwork coaching calls for Neurodynamic Breathwork online. About 10 appointments every week. I speak with one of you guys, one of our subscribers from all around the world, about what they're going through in their breathwork process. Let me ask you this. I know that I recently moved and I've got hardwood floors, and some people have said it's hard to hear me, but can I just get anybody give me some feedback? Are you hearing me fine? Is this okay in terms of voice? Okay, great. Yeah, and actually there's a nice suggestion in there. You can change your name if you don't want your name to be seen. In terms of if you want to go incognito, you can. If you have your video up, you can change your name. And you would do that by right-clicking on your little box to the top, and there's an option to rename. So in those calls that I do, 10 a week for the last 10 months or so, it's a really amazing, fascinating little window onto what people are going through. And in all honesty, about 50% of the time, I get the same question. And so I've been thinking about doing this for a while. I should have done this months ago. But basically, I want to address that question, which is, how do you take your breathwork deeper? A really typical thing that people might ask is, oh, I had this really awesome session on my first time that I did this, but then the last 3 have been kind of, I plateaued and I haven't really dropped in the same way, or something of that nature. So I wonder if there's a way to do a hand raise on this. I guess I'm just kind of assuming that if you're here, you've had some level of experience of having to experience that sometimes. So I'm going to try to do a PowerPoint share here and run through some slides. I've never done this before, but just for the heck of it, raise your hand if you have ever felt like you got stuck in a breathwork session, or you just feel like you haven't been making the progress you'd like, or oh, that's cool. So far 4 people out of 79, 5. Let's see. I don't have a hand raise on mine. Can somebody share with me how you do that? Is there just at the bottom? Is there an option where you click on it? Bottom right. Okay. So if you raise your hand, if you've ever felt stuck, just for informational purposes. Great. So it's a common question, and I want to address that. And I'm gonna share my PowerPoint presentation here. Here we go. Can you all see that? I'm not going to do the full slideshow because it takes up the whole screen and it's harder to maneuver. So taking breathwork deeper, let's just dive into this. So breathwork, first thing I want to say is breathwork reflects life. There's a saying that we have that you hear a lot: how you do anything is how you do everything. And it's really true. The breathwork doesn't bring up stuff that's not relevant for your life or that isn't part of your life. It's a reflection of life. Your issues you have in life are going to show up in your breathwork session. So the first thing I want to say is it's always a good opportunity whenever you're feeling stuck or blocked or just like you're not having the change or the movement you like, to step back when you're out of the breathwork session and just say, hey, where am I feeling stuck in my life? Or if you're in the session, you might ask yourself, have you ever had this experience before in your day-to-day life? Or have you ever felt that way before? Because if you have, and it's something that's a painful part of it's actually something that blocks you, there's no better time. Breathwork is absolutely one of the best places to work with whatever's coming up inside of you. So if it's frustration or anger or grief, so you can really work with that. And a lot of times when you can bring that awareness in, obviously there's a trick here, because there's a fine line between there's a really subtle relationship between your ego thinking mind and your higher self, or your inner guiding intelligence. Because you want to get out of your head. Breathwork doesn't happen in your head, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. But so it's a subtle line, but sometimes it's okay if you're just feeling stuck. You're already in your head to some extent. That you know, ask yourself, where does this come from? And maybe there's some feelings you can tap into from your day-to-day life that might be related. So it's an opportunity to kind of look at, are you feeling comfortable in some way that you just don't really want to look at change? Be curious about it, dive into it. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers. You're welcome to type them into the chat box as we go, but I'm probably not going to spend too much time looking at questions until the end, but you never know. I might go that direction. So, okay, so the first thing I really want to do is ground you all in what I consider the two primal laws of breathwork. Everything we do is driven by these two laws: the law of trust, the law of surrender. So I'm going to ask you, try not to get too distracted by reading ahead, but because I've really sort of subtly picked the things that I think are going to be helpful. And some of you may have heard some of this if you've done coaching calls with me before. But so trust. If you've done any of my workshops, I usually talk about this. But again, I just want to really make sure we're all rooted and grounded in the same principles, because this is critical to understand how to work with stuff that comes up. So the whole core belief of breathwork is that you have an innate guiding intelligence, which I sometimes call the IGI, and that in that part of you, this intuitive knowing, knows exactly what your being needs. And so the trick is to learn to trust that. The best analogy that ever I've seen or come up with is that if you imagine cutting your finger, thankfully you don't have to think in your mind or send out an alarm to get the white blood cells to march down your arm and go heal that cut. It happens completely below your conscious awareness. And I mean, whenever I stop and think about that, it's pretty miraculous if you contemplate it. This whole thing happens. Your physical body will heal itself. What a miracle. Well, the same exact principle applies to this breath work for the psychological system, the emotional system, if you will, the spiritual. It's like, but only when you get out of your head. As long as you have an idea in your mind of what you want to have happen, then you're not going to be accessing that deeper wisdom. So the whole essence of this work, this type of breath work, is to get out of the head and open to that trust. And then once you trust, well, actually, there's another separate beautiful analogy. Just like the way a plant, if it's in the shade and it needs sunlight to survive, it'll start leaning towards the sun. Well, when you get out of your head, your soul, your system, I like that word lately. If it's not comfortable, call it whatever you will, your intuitive self, your inner guiding intelligence. But your soul will lean towards your sun. That's the beautiful thing. You don't have to do anything. You just have to allow it. So that's the trust part. Once you open to that, can you surrender to it? And this is where I love to call breathwork surrender gym. You're going to the gym to build your muscles of surrender and trust. It's like, you know, there's a weave. Like, I like this image that there's a weave between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, and we're opening the weave when we do breathwork. We're opening to our deeper unconscious self. And some people just have a real ease with that. And I'm sure there's some of you here tonight where basically, you know, there's this, it comes easily. There's like a permeability between the conscious and unconscious mind. And those people, I've always been envious because they have just seem to be able to have a knack to get out of their head, drop in, and have these profound experiences. And I don't know, I'm estimating 25 to 30% of people. That's just my estimate from my 28 years of being involved with this. but it's like a third maybe of people just have that knack, and it's great and more power to them. But if you don't have that ease, that super permeability, then breathwork becomes a journey of little by little learning to let go of the thinking mind. The rest of us have to practice to let go of the mind, just to practice surrender. So these are two critical pieces. So whatever's happening, what is your job as a breather based on those two principles? Your job is to let yourself be surprised. The more you're in a state of surprise, the more you're out of your head. And the more you're out of your head, the more efficient and rapid fire the healing and the deepening will happen. So whatever is happening, your job is to let it be as big as it wants to be, anything. That includes the things that are not the things you want to experience. It includes the things that you wish weren't happening. Difficult states of consciousness, anger, grief, stuckness, whatever it might be, irritation or frustration. Whatever that is, the way passes through it. And so in essence, in breathwork, you need to radically trust and accept everything that comes up and follow it. There's this lovely quote, in a movie about the full catastrophe. There's no better place, in my experience, in life, to open to the full catastrophe of what it means to be human than in a breathwork session. And when you just set an intention to be receptive to that catastrophe, the anger, the sadness, the grief, the stuckness, as well as the joyful, that's the optimal place to be. And usually the ego mind, though, has a different opinion on what it wants. It's full of judgments and ideas like, oh, I want that experience. I want to have a transcendent experience today. I want to have a unitive consciousness experience. So the more you can just trust, open up, and receive whatever comes up. And so basically, if you're being stuck, be the best damn stuck you've ever been, because that's the quickest way past it is through it. So if you're feeling stuck, a lot of times you'll hear us say, what you resist is going to persist. So if you're feeling stuck, and you're fighting that, wishing you weren't stuck, it's probably gonna be more persistent. It's paradoxical. I know, it's really subtle stuff. So basically, I've always had a challenge to get out of my head too. I have a strong thinking brain, and I've been in many sessions, and I'm talking, most of the breathwork I've done has been in person, but basically where I'll be lying on the mat and the music starts and I'll start to breathe and I'll start to go into it a little bit, but then 5 minutes pass, 10 minutes, and I'm still stuck. And then suddenly I start hearing somebody like screaming on my right, and then somebody just pounding on my left. And I'm just like, oh, it's frustrating. Like, why are they getting all these good experiences? Like, I'll go to these stories I have in my head about why do I never get these good things? Why is it so hard for me? The story is hard. It's hard and painful. And so then what I've realized and learned is that when that comes up, is to go dive deeper into the feelings around it. There's actually frustration underneath it all. That's my process. That's the radical trust and acceptance, is to accept that I'm frustrated. Because as long as I'm not allowing that frustration up, it's probably blocking me. So then I'll let it up and let it out, and I'll be like, give it some vocalizing, like, and just really let it go. And then usually that's where my session actually begins, is when I stop fighting the underlying feeling of frustration. So this is a yin process, not a yang process. And for those of you that don't know, yin is basically the stereotypical feminine principle. It's about the receptive. Yang is it's more the stereotypical masculine. It's about the assertive. Yin is about how do you receive. Yang is about how you go after things and make them happen yourself. So this is not about making it happen. that as long as you have any inkling in your head that you have to make this happen, you're going to struggle on some level, probably. It's about allowing, being receptive, opening your heart, embracing whatever's coming up, loving what is. We get a lot of people that come in from other breathwork techniques, and I like that some of them that are coming just determined that I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to have an incredible experience today. I'm just going to breathe to the maximum, like super duper intense, full deep intense breathing for the whole hour. And more often than not, probably a high percentage of the time not, those people struggle and don't drop in the way that they wish they would. So once again, receptivity, open-hearted, allowing, trusting. So I want to share this. I've been doing this for 28 years, and I still have the strong, notable breakthrough moments maybe once in every 4, 5, or 6 sessions. The rest of the time, I'm working up my muscles, building my muscles in surrender gym. It doesn't mean I don't have insights. It doesn't mean I don't get a lot of benefits out of it. In fact, to me, I get these benefits out of it always, no matter what else is going on. You know, I'm building my muscles of surrender. I always get some sort of intuitive insight, or usually, not always maybe, but sometimes intuitive insights about my life might emerge. Physical relaxation. I normally never feel more relaxed than after a breathwork session. I just feel like I've had an energetic reset, like my chi flow is all reset. Feel more grounded emotionally. And then here's just on a physiological level, the breathing brings more oxygen into your system. It's actually carbon dioxide, but the end result is it alkalizes it, which evokes anti-inflammation. So you get anti-inflammational properties out of breathwork. I don't know if you guys knew that, but so I've dealt with an autoimmune condition my whole life that involves my skin, and I always find that if it's in a period where it's affecting me, every time I do breath work, it gets more gentle and less intense. So the IGI, the inner guiding intelligence, always strives to bring you harmony, equilibrium, homeostasis, balance, however you want to say that. Now, this works on many levels. At the most mundane physical level, it could be that you haven't had enough sleep. So what's the inner guiding intelligence going to bring you? It's going to bring you a yogic sleep state. It's going to help you get back to balance because you haven't had enough sleep in your life. So that's super mundane, but it's basically just about what is your soul needing right now? Or you might be maybe spending a lot of time in your thinking mind. You have an intense job where you're making decisions or dealing with people all the time in the head. Then the IGI might bring you into the body, like really bring you into feeling the body, or into yoga nidra, which is what Michael calls a yogic trance state. But there's a whole slew of yogic sleep states that have been defined in the Eastern traditions. Yoga nidra is the most common one that comes up in breathwork. I think of it as the antidote to the ego monkey thinking mind. Like, it's basically where you go into the state where you almost feel like you're sleeping, but you know you're not. You're still in awareness there. And it's considered to be deeply restorative. Whenever I go there, I come out at the end of the session just profoundly relaxed. And it's basically a state of egolessness. You lose your mind. You're there. I mean, your presence is there, your awareness is there, but your ego isn't. It's a lovely state to be in. So I mean, some people say that nothing happens when this happens, but I mean, I'm definitely here to tell you something's happening there, and it's being driven by some inner guiding intelligence inside of you. I mean, okay, now let's take it to another direction. Maybe you've been sitting at your computer too long. You have tightness, tension, pain, chi blockages in some of your body. Those areas might instinctively start to move in your session. So I don't know, I'll talk a little bit more about movement in a few minutes, but I don't know how many of you have found yourself or have allowed yourself or found yourself moving in a session. Movement is a really powerful experience. I personally didn't have a breakthrough until my third breathwork session, like a really powerful experience where I was just sold on breathwork for the rest of my life. And one of the things that happened for me was I went off on this journey, and I don't often get visuals, so it was a really cool moment. And in the journey, I found myself, my body started moving to the music. It started with my feet, and then I started using my hands like I was drumming or something. And then pretty soon my whole body started taking off. And I literally found my whole body being moved by the music. And I love words, and I love the word in the English language, the word animated. I felt animated. And the root word of animated is anima in Latin, which means soul. So basically, I felt like I was being insolated, animated. Like it blew my mind, because before that time, you know, if you'd asked me if I would ever be a dancer, or if I had any rhythm, I was like 25 or 26 at the time. I had no rhythm. You might get me on the dance floor if I had a couple beers, for one of the things that came up was, oh my God, I actually have rhythm. It was mind blowing to just stop trying, and my body just started moving. So really, if you haven't experienced that, create an open-hearted receptivity to open to it if it happens. You know, it's not that different from tapping your finger in the car when a great song comes on. You do it without thinking. So back to this. So sometimes I feel, oh wait, you've been sitting at the computer too long and you have tightness. So basically, what I have found literally is that when I work at the computer a lot, I might get certain areas of tension in my body, and then if I just lay down and do a breath work, those areas will instinctively start to move. It's like, because I've given permission to my body to go where it wants to go, and it's not coming from my head. It's just my body just, when I give it permission, it starts moving. And it's like those parts of my muscles, my chi, whatever, it's like they start to the places that are stuck start opening up. And I actually sometimes I feel like my body is basically saying to me, thank God it's about time you're allowing me to fully move. You know, like the places that you hold yourself, that you're stuck in your day-to-day reality, those are going to come up in your breath work, you know, and they're going to, in fact, I almost feel like there's a body barrier that I have to go through before I get to the deep stuff sometimes. As long as my body's tense and I'm holding emotional stuff, something in me just doesn't let me go very often to the deeper things. And so it's really typical in my sessions that I have to go through this I have to go through this movement and just let my body just move and be moved by it. And, you know, it's like, it feels amazing when it's all said and done. It looks really strange if you're not used to it. But see, that's the advantage that I have that you guys don't have, just having been involved in so many in-person workshops. Because when you're around other people, you see these things much more easily. So I'm just trying to give you a deeper sense of the possibilities here. But it's really helpful to let yourself move. So the inner guiding intelligence also might work. So it might be super mundane, but it also might work on the emotional level. You know, emotions block our vital life energy. If you're holding something that's unprocessed from childhood, from last week, from 5 years ago, losing a loved one, those things get stored in our body. And when you get out of your head, breathwork will open you up to those feelings. And again, it's just, you have to be radical trust and acceptance of whatever's happening, and follow it, and remember that the way passes through. You need to open up more of anything that comes up. So allow, trust, surrender. It also works on more subtle levels. So, you know, visions, dreamlike sequences, which bring you messages about your life that you can bring back. You know, and sometimes people get insights through their intuitive mind. This is something that I just learned a few years ago. I ran a breathe group about 3 years ago, where we just had eight women who came for 8 straight weeks in a row, and we did a breath work with the 8 of us in person for 8 weeks. And most of the people in that group had really powerful experiences. One of them, her name was Noreen, and I have her permission to share this. She never dropped in. That's what she said. She said that she never could get into the experience that everybody else was. But she kept coming back because she said, because I'm getting, she got all these intuitive insights about her life that she didn't realize in her day. She didn't slow herself down enough in her daily life. And so breathwork was working with her through her intuitive mind. So I guess that really reminded me, there's so many spiritual traditions that say, get out of the monkey mind, the mind is bad, and I kind of had been going too far to the extreme on that. And it reminds me that there's actually a higher mind that sometimes things can come through breathwork. So whatever the level is, breathwork will work with you and it brings up the things that you're not paying attention to, and says, pay attention to me. This is the path back to your wholeness, back to your balance and equilibrium. So sometimes, we talked about this in some of the writings that you may have read, but you can work with a sitter. In the Groff holotropic breathwork, they work with sitters all the time. And that's where you have somebody who comes in, and their sole purpose for that entire workshop is to sit and be present with you and to support you, just basically be a sacred witness. But they also can give on the spot support for difficult issues that you're working with. The two most common areas that I'd recommend this for, if you're going through this in breathwork and feeling trapped or stuck, is if you're working with old trauma. It can be really valuable sometimes to have somebody there who can just, if you feel like you get into a fearful place or things get a little too intense and you're nervous about it, where you can just reach out your hand and they can hold your hand. It's amazing how much you're letting somebody hold your hand, or even put their hand on your shoulder and let you know that they're there with you, how valuable that can be when you're in a fearful experience. And the other thing is, I encounter this about once a month where somebody tells me they're really struggling with the breathing. They can't stay with it. Like I just talked to somebody last week who literally said that she could go 5 minutes at most, and then she would stop breathing, and she just was struggling. And so sometimes there's a whole set of reasons why this might be the case. And I don't have time to go into it, but Dr. Stan Groff has a whole model. One of the things that he's known for is he believes that the birth process leaves a much deeper imprint on our pre-verbal psyches than modern Western psychology acknowledges. And basically, I'm a skeptic. I thought it was interesting when I first started doing breathwork with him, but I didn't really believe it. I'll just say that I went through some experiences that left me a profound believer that the birth process does leave a powerful pre-verbal imprint. And if you happen to have a pre-verbal imprint where you had a difficult birth and you were struggling to breathe, or you had the umbilical cord around your neck, that body memory might still be there, and that can sometimes affect people that are struggling with the breathing. And when this has come up in the facilitation that I've done, those people really often do need a sitter, just in case that's you. I mean, if that's an issue for you, then drop me a line or say something in the chat, and we can talk more about it sometime. So the most important thing, if you ever do bring in somebody, this is absolutely critical. They have to know this is 100%, not 95%, not 85%. It's 100% about you. They have to put all their feelings, all their judgments, all their intuitions aside. And I spell judgments the British way. Just noticed that. My mother's English, so I have a little bit of that in me. So that's a really hard thing to do. Not everybody can do that. They're there to witness and support. And in fact, think about our culture. What do we do instinctively if somebody starts to cry? We hand them a tissue. Sitters are not supposed to give you tissues unless you reach out your hand and ask for it. So Michael and I have been talking about this. We may have a whole webinar about this in the next month or two, and for those that are interested in the sitter process. Okay, so now I want to just put this in a larger context, kind of to remind you guys that there's a forest, and not just the trees in breathwork. Basically, there's a bigger picture here. So think about it this way. Every year you're in the world, every year we build certain habits and habitual patterns in our brain. The older we get, every year that passes, the neuronal pathways get more lubricated. The path turns into a road, turns into a superhighway. They become much easier to follow these habitual patterns. They're much more challenging to bust out of. The more lubricated the mental pattern, the longer you have to give it to break out and create new habits. So you got to drop your expectations. I mean, I'm not saying it's not just about age. It's just also about, childhood. Many of us had to develop certain safety methods in as a child to keep us safe. Like, I for one, I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional environment, very actually, with mental illness and all kinds of stuff going on. And my thing was, I would read books all the time. I would avoid dealing with my family by reading all the time. So that was a pattern that I developed through childhood. But I also think that sometimes some of us are more inclined to be, we're just wired to be more in the mental realm. It's different for everybody. But I want to tell you this one story about a participant I've had in a workshop that this is one of the most moving, definitely the top 2 or 3 most powerful experiences I've witnessed. But it wasn't something that happened overnight. About 10 years ago, I had a participant who came to our workshop, and she was, in her second half of life, and she'd been a computer programmer her entire life. And she was very much in her head, and she also knew that something traumatic had happened to her in her childhood. But she could never pinpoint it. She wasn't sure, but she knew something was in there, and she felt like it affected her ability to be intimate and make connections with others. And she went to a therapist 3 times, and it didn't help. She couldn't bust out of it. And so then she read about breathwork in her early 50s, and she's like, oh my gosh, I think if something's going to help me out of this, this is going to be the thing. So she came to one of our workshops. This was in person. She almost walked right out because we were sitting on pillows in a circle. That was a little freaky for her. But she got past that, and she sat down, told her story. She was in our morning breath session, and in this in-person workshop, the sessions are 3 hours, so it was a long session. And she just had an incredibly intense session. It was like almost from the get-go. She was just like screaming and like in distress, and a lot of it was grief, and you could tell she was afraid of some fear. And it just went on and on and on. It was really dark. It was very painful to watch, and when she came out of the session, she was just totally felt exhausted and beat up and all these things, but she had a glow on her face that she basically said, you know what, for the first time in my life, I actually have a sense. I don't have visuals, but I have a sense of what happened to me. And she was so excited that came up, and it inspired her to come back and do it again. And at that time, we were doing workshops once a month, and so in person. And so she came back a month later, and she started coming every month. And every single session, 3 hours of darkness and intensity and fear and just shaking and trembling and all kinds of horrible, difficult things. And it went on for a whole year. It went on for a whole year and a half. Every session, she kept coming because she felt like it gave her hope that at some point she would break through something. Well, at the year and a half point, halfway, somewhere in the middle of the session, for about 10 or 15 minutes, she had her first experience of joy. I'm going to cry just thinking about it. It was such a beautiful moment. Like, she started sobbing tears of joy and laughing uncontrollably, when going back and forth. And she got this like bird's eye view of the whole process, and then it went away in 15 minutes, and she went back into darkness. but that one experience was like, oh my God, I've worked a year and a half. Well, at the 2-year point, she had her first session that was more light than darkness. And she's now, 10 years later, she's a breathwork facilitator, and she's completely worked through it in that whole process. So I just like to share that story because some of these old, I'm not saying you all have trauma like that, but you might. But regardless of whether you do, some of these old patterns don't just go away overnight. You have to work with them. You know, there's a journey. It's a journey of working, of practicing, getting out of your head. But I guarantee you, when you, just from doing this for 28 years now, from working with Dr. Groff, he's been studying this stuff for 60 years. He's written almost 30 books, which are really fascinating if you're interested. And then this work with the neurodynamic work, it's like the inner guidance is amazing. It will bring you just what you need, but you have to give it permission and allow it and surrender to it. So I have another story to illustrate the similar point, but it's a little bit different. Often the IGI works below the surface in ways your ego mind doesn't understand. And this is lovely, actually, because sometimes things clear. You might have a catharsis or release that doesn't pass through your cognitive mind. You don't necessarily have a thought process about what happened. I've had so many times where people just say, something released, but I have no idea what it was. But then they talk to me a week later, and they'll be like, something's different in me. Like when you release something that's been stuck, it's like you're freeing up vital energy, some vital life energy, and things start shifting in your life. I have a story about my training. I did when I trained with Dr. Stanislav Grof. It was a 2-year-long training program. It's the most intense breathwork training program in the world, and it's 9 weeks of residential training. And over that 2 years, and my favorite experience in the entire process was during the final 2 weeks, which we call certification, and in that breathwork, we would do artwork at the end of every breathwork session. Before, we would encourage people, before they would talk too much, to express their session on paper, the symbols that came up, the colors that came up. And it's not about making something pretty, it's just about getting it down on paper, no matter how ugly your left brain thinks it is. And in fact, when I would do it, I'd always use my opposite hand. I'd use my left hand, because then I'd relax about it, and I found that I was actually a better artist when I wasn't trying hard with my right hand. But anyway, so basically we everybody, and then at the end of, after doing the mandala, you encourage people to put their date on it, and on the back side, some people like to write what happened, like with the actual breakdown of what happened in the left brain. Okay, so in the back to the training, the final 2 weeks, we were all instructed to bring our entire set of mandalas from our entire breathwork journey. And at that point, I'd been doing breathwork for about 13, 12 years. So I had a lot of mandalas, and so did many other people. But it was the most amazing thing to me. During the last week, everybody had a chance to put their whole mandala's story, breathwork story, chronologically by mandala in the middle of the circle, and tell their story of their inner journey. And it really blew my mind. It really opened me up to a whole other level of breathwork, because you would see these amazing, like in one moment, they'd say, yeah, I had in this one session here, this interesting image came up, and I had no idea what it was. But I put it in the mandala, just whatever, because it came up. And then like a year and a half later, the same thing comes up, and the whole breathwork was about that symbol. Or you notice the color themes. That was super mind-blowing, to just, like, somebody would use the same colors over and over again for 6 months or for 3 years. And then suddenly you could tell they had a breakthrough, because suddenly they're using different colors. So it was just amazing. It just really gave me pause to think, wow, there's a much deeper wisdom to the inner healer, to the inner guiding intelligence, to the soul, to the whatever your intuitive wisdom, than we often give it credit for. That it's like there's a director behind the scenes if you can just allow that. So that's my mandala story. Okay, so now I have another story. The role of the will in breathwork. So I looked up the definition of will to make sure I was using the right word. The definition I came up with was the mental power used to control and direct your thoughts and actions, or determination to do something despite difficulties or opposition. All right, so most of the time I think the will is not what you want in breathwork, because it's about surrender. Will is a little more yang. It's a paradox. So what do I mean by this? Well, as everything, as in most things in the spiritual realms, in the deep inner realms, there is more of a paradox here. And so I learned this in a powerful way once, and it actually involves Michael. I went through a breakup of a relationship that lasted 10 years or so. This was about 10 years ago, somewhere in that range. And so I had this really sweet friend. I had a birthday coming up, and I was really feeling it. Didn't want the relationship to end. And this friend, for my birthday, went ahead and invited all these people for a birthday party for me. I was really touched. But then some of my friends came from out of town. One of them was Michael. And at the end of the weekend, so it was a beautiful weekend. At the end of that weekend, I had two friends left, Michael and another very dear friend of mine. And after everybody else had left, they both turned to me, they're like, Glenn, you need a breath work. You're dealing with a lot of emotion here. You got to give permission to go inside and do some work here. And I knew they were right, and I'm just like, okay, I know you're right. And the beautiful friends, they offered to sit for me, to be my sitters. However, my other friend, who knows me very, very well, she gave me one ultimatum. She said, listen, Glenn, I would love to stay here another night and sit for you, but only under one condition. The condition is you have to commit to me that you're going to go as deep as you possibly can in this session. And I was like, oh, that's counter to everything we always say, isn't it? How could I commit to going deep when, I have to be in the yin space and allow and just trust the process? Well, but I thought about it again, and it reminded me of a retreat I had once attended, where this Eastern teacher had presented this concept called the sword of truth. Just love this concept. But basically, the idea is we almost carry a sword of discernment in our hand, and as we walk through life, the quicker we can identify the distractions to our true purpose and slice them, the faster you can do that, the more clear you're going to be, the more you're going to stay in your path. And so we spent this weekend creating a sort of discernment that we carried. So I remembered that, and I'm thinking, okay, I could bring this sort of discernment into this. And so I said, okay, yes, I'm committed. I'm going to do everything I can. And actually, the other thing she said was, if the trickster mind comes up, you got to let it go and don't get distracted by it. And our minds are very trickstery. They bring up things in challenging ways that are very subtle, that take our attention away from what we really need to do. So I determined I wasn't going to let anything distract me. The session started, and I just went for it. And whenever I get those usually distracting thoughts, like, oh, I wonder how I'm moving a lot right now. I wonder how I look. What are they thinking about my? And I'd be like, oh no, slice it, sword of truth. Or, oh my God, I forgot to call that other friend. What shit out of the head, slice it. And I just did that throughout the whole session. And it was definitely one of the more powerful sessions I've ever had. I really went very deep. And I used that tool. If you mean business and breathwork, carry your sword of truth. It's helpful. That's all I'm saying. It's something to consider. That what if you could actually commit to not being distracted? It's an interesting concept, and I'll just leave you with that, and we can talk about it more at the end if there's questions about it. So a few other practical suggestions. So these are just tips that I have for you, like practical tips that you can use to try to go deeper if you're feeling stuck. So the first one is change up the breathing. This one I actually have gotten from some participants that I've spoken to. You know, we normally don't emphasize the upper chest, and I certainly don't. I'm not saying you should definitely do this, but it's worth trying. Some people have told me that when they breathe more into the upper chest, it has opened up their emotions more deeply. So you always don't ever stop breathing from the belly. You always fill the belly, but you also maybe take an extra little puff up in the upper chest. And that's one thing you might just check out. Now, I'm going to skip ahead to this third one first. Bring the body into the breath. So when I breathe, I've realized over time that I have a really physical process. When I breathe, it's almost like I feel like I'm breathing through my feet. Like I breathe kind of like, when I breathe out, my feet push forward, and then my legs kind of push forward, and then it's like this whole thing, and that helps you. When sometimes bringing the body helps you get into the deeper trance state. I mean, it's basically about getting into trance and self-hypnosis. So if your body, you might just explore this sometimes. I know a few other people that use their arms when they breathe. So like, this is what it looks like. Where they push up with their arms. And it's almost like they're pushing their mind away. They're pushing away their resistance. But sometimes bringing the body in can really help you get deeper into that trance state. Visualizations. Okay, so in some of my earlier breathwork sessions in my journey, I got some images, and that really, okay, so one time I saw a really vivid image of an aperture on a camera. And if you don't know what an aperture is, it's that thing when you press the button and the shutter, it opens up the shutter and then it closes right away. That's the aperture that opens and closes. And so I saw this aperture, and something in me said, that's the gateway between my conscious mind and my unconscious mind. And so I just started, like, I need to open that aperture. That's what it's telling me. And so I started just imagining that aperture opening. With every breath, the aperture opens more. And it gave my mind an extra thing to do, and it really helped me like get out of the head and get more into the trance. Another session, I had a different image. I had an image of being on a surfboard, lying down on a surfboard with my arms out parallel and my palms up. I was on the ocean, and with every breath, it's like I could see the surfboard. I was blowing the surfboard further out, away from all people, out to the deep ocean. Like, and the surfboard was just humming along, and the farther I got, the deeper I got. And at some point, when I was in the middle of nowhere, a whirlpool came in and it sucked me down. And that was another really powerful session. So, you might try those images, or ask your inner guidance to bring you an image that might work for you if you have a difficult, ornery process. So also, I said this earlier, but just a reminder, movement really helps with trance. If you're, a large number of people can go deep into trance without any movement, and more power to them. But if you're struggling, you might try to bring in the movement. And then the vocalizing too. I mean, vocalizing can really, especially with anger and frustration, especially if you've held your voice in, it's like, oh my God, I think I'm going to talk about anger. Oh, I actually missed something. I got one more story to tell you. Anger is something anger is our power. And the longer I've done breathwork, the more I've come to believe that we are super suppressors of anger in this culture, in modern Western society. We just don't have many spaces to helpfully allow our anger to release, and so we either do it, sideways or in ways that are unhealthy. But when I was in my 20s, I never ever accessed anger. I would always bypass it and jump to compassion. I just, somebody would cut me off on the road, and my Italian side would be like, "Hey man, what the frick?" And then I'd be like, "Oh wait, stop, breathe. They probably woke up on the wrong side of the bed today. They probably had a traumatic childhood. Give them a break." And I'd be like, I'll get all compassionate, and I wouldn't, I'd hold back the anger. That's pretty much how I spent my 20s. And then the deeper I got into breath work, the more I started realizing there's a lot of anger in me. And you really, if you have any anger, I mean, I can't imagine that any of us are completely clear on all of our anger. Breathwork is a really powerful space to work with that. To give it permission. And usually when I hit anger, there's a vocalizing that happens with it. Like, I've really learned to let it up and out. And where does that slide here? I think I must have missed it because I had some more things to say about this. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, I missed this whole slide altogether. What do you know? So yeah, I really believe there's a pandemic of suppressed anger in modern society. I already shared that. So floor pillows are incredibly valuable for this. When I do breathwork personally, breathwork online, I always have at least 2 big floor pillows, one on each side of me when I'm lying down. And that's because if I get to anger, then I'll start. If they're there, I might just start using them. Be like, "Argh!" but I mean, it's not. Sometimes you can fake it till you make it, but it's really about going deep into your belly and letting that up and out. That's what really catharts it. You can also use the pillows to cover your mouth if you're worried about somebody hearing you. Now, I'm just going to say this, but when I have the space, I like to have a breathwork room, and I put in my breathwork room, because of my experience with anger and movement and stuff, I have a giant 3-inch high-density foam twin bed-sized pad with 10 giant pillows all around the pad. And that just totally lets me go as deep as I want into anger and other stuff. Now, not everybody needs to go to anger. I'm not trying to say this, but I do think we suppress way more of it than we acknowledge. And I don't know if I need to tell the story, but I just, if we have time later, after we're all done, I can share it. But I have a story of when I really learned what anger was. So this whole slide is about, these are other factors you might consider that could inhibit your capacity to go deeper. And I just talked about, are you afraid of anger? Ask yourself this. Because if you're afraid of it, then if there's any anger in there, you might suppress it, which might shut down your whole process. You have to be aware of that. Same thing for fear of grief. I know there's a lot of people, myself included, grief can be intense. Like the fear that if you really surrender to it, what if it overwhelms me? What if I can never come out of it? What if I drown in it? I mean, if you have those fears, you're going to need to address them before you're going to give full permission to go in. And also, I'll do the first one last, but this last piece, do you feel physically safe? So if you're in other words, if you're holding in suppressed anger, you're not going to let your anger up because you're not going to feel safe to let it loose, which is good because we wouldn't want you doing it if you're not safe. That's why this breathwork works so beautifully. But if you want to go deeper, you have to create an environment to open to that. Would you fall off your bed if you really get into anger? Would you hit your head if you surrender? No. So that's another question to ask yourself. And then lastly, this is a big one. Fear of change. Breath work catalyzes change. Back when I first started doing breath work, and I in the Chicago area, and I didn't miss a workshop for the first year and a half. And everybody in my community there, everybody would always say, if you want change, keep doing breath work. Change is going to happen. Just keep doing this. It's really true. But change is inconvenient. It disrupts us. It disrupts our loved ones. And so many times we say we want change, but do we really want it? Are we feeling are we too comfortable where we are? Are there relationship challenges that we don't really want to face because it's going to mean conflict? Are you stuck in a job that you just really can't stand? You know, if those are gonna, this is a big question, and this is back where breathwork reflects life. If you're on a plateau in your life, if you're not open to the change, the continuous quality change and direction and movement in the unfolding of your soul in your day-to-day life, then you're probably going to be in breathwork too. So I just put that out there as a question to ask yourself. If there's time, I'll go to that anger story. So let's see. Change it. Yeah, I talked about all of these. So there's some great practical suggestions. And then lastly, I want to share something. And actually, I recently got a neurofeedback device. It's super simple. It's just a band. It's a headband that I wear. You wear it around your head, and it's got brain sensors on the back in about 9 places. And you connect it to your phone via Bluetooth and run an app, and then you meditate. And basically what it does, it gives you feedback on what's happening with your brain waves. And it tells you, it measures 3 states of consciousness by the brain waves you're in. Are you in intense thinking mind? Are you kind of in the middle zone between thoughts and focus? Calm focus is what the 3rd state is called. Or are you in calm focus? And calm focus is what we all want. The more you can be in calm focus, the more powerful you're going to live your life. Because when you're in that calm focus state, your presence, your ability to make deep, empowered choices that come from the core of your being, and also fully integrate the external stimuli that are coming in. We want, the more calm we can be, the more focused. You know, like I'm a chess player, and I play online chess with people from all over the world, and I have noticed this for years. There's times where I feel like I'm a complete victim. There's nothing I can do, where I just cannot make the right move. I can't see the board very well. And there's other times where I'm just in a zone. I'm in the flow, as they say, and I can't make a wrong move. And I might go up 100 points in rating in one day and go down 100 points another day. And it's always been trippy to me. I'm just like, it has to be my stress level, my calm focus ability. And that's one of the reasons I bought this meditation device, to sort of practice that, because I know I'm pretty good when I'm really calm and focused, but when I'm stressed, I don't even, my vision needs to change. I don't even see the things I see. And it's mind-boggling to me how my same brain could see one. It's almost like I have a blind spot some days and other days not. So that inspired me. And so having been using this for just only 10 days, I feel like I'm getting some powerful insights into the mind, including how the mind works in breath work, which is why I want to share this with you. So I'm going to share I'm going to switch the screen share to a different, this is the last slide. And I'm going to switch over to a different share. Where did we go here? New share. There we go. Okay, so do you see this this graph? So this is literally just a 5-minute meditation. This was the very first one I ever did, actually. So in this graph, this line at the bottom, if you're down below in this blue area, below this line, you're in calm focus, which is amazing, beautiful state. If you're in the middle here, you're in that mid zone between, thoughts and really intensely thinking. And up here is you're in super thinking mind, active mind. So what happens, this is fascinating. The way this works is I'm listening to audio feedback. Literally instantly, as my brainwaves change, the audio that I hear changes. That's why it's feedback, neurofeedback. And literally, so it starts out as rain. I hear rain falling in the forest. And the higher up I am here, the louder the rain is. As I get more relaxed, the rain gets quieter. And as when the rain stops, then I'm in calm focus. So if you can see what happened here, I was totally in my head, and I got myself some momentum going. I started to relax, and then I got to the point where the rain stopped, and then I was like, yes, and my mind kicked in, and I immediately jumped right back up. So if you look at all these spikes, I go down, and in a second I go down, I get shot back right up. I really believe this is what happens in breathwork. Those of us with these dang ornery thinking minds, we start to have an experience like, oh my God, I'm having energy, or new energetic experience, or oh my God, I'm having this insight. And then your mind starts watching, you're like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then you pop back out. So I'm just sharing this because I think that there's muscles. This is the surrender gym. You're practicing the muscles of trust and surrender. This thing is called a Muse. Yeah, the Muse S, Ryan, thank you. You can get it, there's a Muse website. You can also buy it on Amazon. So I just wanted to share that because I think it's relevant for breathwork, and it just illustrates that it's a practice. You have to learn to get out of the head. Let's see here. This was a more recent one. You can see I've been getting better at getting into calm states, but it fluctuates. It's definitely not a one-way path. Oh, and the other thing is when you get to a certain point, you get bird chirps, and then at the end you get this. This is pretty funny. I don't want to start competitive meditation wars, but this damn thing, it's like it tells you, oh, you had 26 birds in that session, meaning you only get the birds when you get past a certain point of calm focus, and you hear a little chirp, and you're like, oh yay, cool, bird chirp. But anyway, so that's what I got to share with you guys. And so at this point, I've been talking my head off for competitive meditation wars for a long time here. So now I want to go back to hear your questions, and I can open this up for questions about anything you guys might want to talk about.